All right. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And I think the best way to start is introductions. My name is Tom Cran. I am an executive recruiter. I spent over 20 years building primarily cybersecurity teams. Most of the jobs that I filled were customer facing. Anders?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Anders Farrell. I recently graduated in math and computer science from University of Santa Cruz, and then I'm currently working as a data scientist at Joby, which is a startup that's building electric air taxis.
And I'm Bob Vallone. I spent 35 years running software startups in the Bay Area. And just retired in the middle of COVID. So happy to be helping out with things like this.
Cool. So I want to start this out with how did this talk originate? So I have a son who is a junior at University of Utah studying computer science. I brought him together with my son, with Bob, and with Anders to give him some career advice. And we had a really productive session. And I thought, gosh, maybe we can use this for other folks. And I talked to my son after and said, Riley, what did you think? And he said, Dad, it was really humbling. And I thought, And I said, Bob and Anders said some of the same things that I've been saying to you. And he said, yeah, but you're my dad. So I'm hoping today that you guys will take me more seriously than my son has. But we welcome you all here, and we're looking forward to a really good session. So our purpose in our talk today.
Wait, sorry, excuse me. You currently teach for University of Utah? Or you?
No. My son is a computer science student at the University of Utah. He's a junior.
Okay.
This year. I am an executive recruiter. Yeah, I'm an executive recruiter who worked in cyber for 20 plus years. I had my own business.
So are you currently at University of Utah or no more?
No, I'm not.
Sorry.
I'm not. It's okay. So I think where I'd like to begin the conversation is getting started. I don't know if any of you have applied for internships or in the job search mode, but why don't we take a look?
Tom, do we know the results of our survey?
Yeah, let's take a look at that first. Sorry, thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
You know what? It looks like no one has filled it out yet.
Oh, well, let's prompt them again and pause for 10 seconds.
You know what? I think I might need to, now that I've stopped sharing it, to make the screen big.
Yeah, actually, most of the participants are saying they did fill it out in the chat.
Oh, okay. So let me just click share results. Let's see what happens. No, that's interesting. It didn't register.
I've got the results on the screen.
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Okay,
yeah, we're seeing it.
Alrighty. Everyone got it on there, and interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing it so we can keep on moving along.
Oh, could you put it back for 1 second? I was just
want to take a
summary
look
for Tom and Anders. The way I would summarize this is that 90% of the participants here are already in their second through fourth years or more, and 70% of them intend to go on to a four-year school. So we'll address the majority of our comments to that audience, but we'll also address some of you who are earlier or intending to stop after 2 years.
Good enough. Bob, thanks for regrounding me. Yeah. So I think the first thing on that note to talk about is in getting started to, I'm going to say, ready yourself for the workforce. I think, what do you do in school? Anders, you had all sorts of good ideas. What did you do in school to ready yourself for the workforce?
Okay, well, so I think there are a few steps you can take, but kind of the gist of it is that whatever you're doing in school is not going to be enough to be competitive. Like if if I'm on the other side of an interview and I see a resume where people just took their coursework, it's like probably discarded right away, or it didn't even make, the resume didn't even make it to me. And so in general, people want to see that you're doing stuff in tech outside of school. And so that doesn't necessarily mean like already have an internship or something, but you should be seeking to learn on your own. So there are a bunch of different ways you can do that. You know, blogs, read textbooks on your own, just in general, seek to go beyond what you're learning in class. So maybe at first I can just be learn a new programming language if you're just like starting out. And then once you're comfortable, you know a few tools, try to build stuff on your own and then put them online, have a portfolio that people can look at, stuff you've built.
Where did you put them? GitHub?
Yeah, GitHub is great. Actually having a personal website and just learning how to build a website from scratch, that's a good exercise. And then you can host your projects on your personal website.
Let me add to what Andrew said and make some other suggestions as well. First, you know, after hiring hundreds of tech people, I completely agree with Andrews. Is we never interviewed or looked seriously at any resume that consisted of just the student's coursework. So if you're a recent graduate, and I know this may be hard to hear for some of you, but honestly, it's way better that you would be hearing it now instead of, you know, 6 months or a year or two or more from now when you finally finish your degree and are feeling great about it. And then you're thinking, why am I not getting any interviews? Because I worked so hard just to get through this coursework. So I don't want to take more time to expand on why that's the case, but just sort of take our word for it that it is the case and that you really need to have some experience and things that you've actually accomplished under your belt. And even if they're just things that you've accomplished with other students in school clubs or tech clubs or informal groups of other students that are taking some of the same classes as you are, where so meeting other students of, you know, your same cohort or a year or two above who can help you extend your skill set and help you with practical advice about how to do it. Actually, and then I just agree with Anders, anything you can do that you can point to by including descriptions of it on your personal website or just being able to talk about it and describe it, that makes a huge, big difference if you put some stuff on your resume that's concrete.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to add something to that. I met Anders at the Data Science Club at UCSC. He was the vice president of the club. I was looking for a speaker to talk to some students at Santa Cruz High, and hence we began speaking. So clubs are a great way to start. Both of you guys, could you guys talk a little bit about just networking at school? What can you do to network?
Well, I can talk about my own experience. I think like the first thing is like actually go and talk to people in like your computer science or math or whatever classes. Talk to people. If someone seems good at what they do, especially if they're maybe like an older peer, I learned a ton from just like going up to older peers, like just like talking about tech, talking about projects. You learn a lot, and often these are people who will be able to point to you to good resources down the line or maybe jobs. Yeah, so talk to people in your classes. If they're tech-oriented clubs, you should join them, talk to people there. If there isn't one, start one. That's what I did.
And talk to your instructors and anyone else that's available to you from your college. So typically there are people whose roles are to sort of help connect students to opportunities to expand their experience. And certainly all of your instructors you should be trying to spend time with them, get to know them, ask them for their suggestions about how you can improve your experience level and your knowledge and your marketability. And they'll all have good ideas as well. Don't be shy. You can't get ahead and you can't get a tech job if neither if you think it's just about the coursework or if you're kind of too shy or embarrassed or awkward. You really have to overcome all that, because the other thing we can tell you, all of us, is that social skills and communication skills are tremendously important in the job hunting process. And So if you're feeling too shy or unconfident or not sure of your abilities, the best, you got to get over that now or in the next year or two, not, by the time you're already interviewing. So just dive in there and get over it.
Bob, I'm going to build on something that you just said. I took a class as an undergraduate. I was a junior. It was a marketing class, and the project that was the biggest determinant of our grade was a team project. I had in my 4-person group 2 gals who'd already gotten a job. They had a job offer. This was the spring semester, and they were like adamant.
We're not on video or anything. No, they can see.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Tom.
Oh, okay. So they were very adamant in saying that they were going to do nothing. Well, in that course, my option was to take a lower grade and or to take an incomplete and finish myself. And I did that and got an A. Okay. But I missed the point. Okay. And this is my point, that in IT and in industry, you're going to find that you're going to have to learn to work with people well. Okay. So projects are very frequently group projects. And I would strongly suggest you seek out opportunities to work in group projects successfully with other people, because getting things done in groups will mean you're going to have to work with your manager, your peers, and people in other departments. And you want them to be your friends and to work with you. So team projects are skill building projects, social skills building.
Tom, maybe we should build on that and give a few examples of ways where you can find that kind of project outside of class. Because so one way, once you're maybe a bit more confident in your skills, is to join hackathons. There are like dozens of these happening every year in the Bay Area. All of them are remote, so you don't even need to make the time commitment of traveling. And like, join a hackathon, join a team at a hackathon, and just force yourself to build something. And that helps you.
Do you have like the schedule, or is that like online somewhere I could find it? I live in the Bay Area, so like
like a hackathon schedule.
yeah,
sure.
like,
Yeah, go on Major League, search Major League Hacking, and they're like kind of the association that helps organize hackathons like all around the Bay Area.
Maybe you could put a link to that, Anders, in the chat.
Yeah, that I will do that. So that's a great way, because it forces you to build something kind of under pressure and work with people and cooperate something. Another thing.
Yeah.
Another way.
Thank you.
Someone already put it. Another way to do that is and that's maybe something more advanced, but once you're a bit more confident, you can try contributing to, say, open source packages you use. And that can be as simple as like fixing a bug or, submitting a small feature, but that helps you learn how to like build code that other people look at, how to communicate with other people about the quality of your code, and so on.
And if you're in listening, Tom, hang on one second. In listening to Anders, if you're feeling like this is too far away from where you are now or your abilities, the steps you would take in advance of that are the things we've already mentioned, which is that try to learn from older peers, try to understand what you need to know that you don't yet know, and spend a lot of time doing things on your own to improve your skill set, but while still trying to find other people in your same boat. Like, no matter what cohort you are in or what skill level you're in, there'll be people in the same position who want to improve their situation the same way you do, and who can help join you in your efforts to learn from older students, or to ask people's advice about what languages or tool sets or frameworks would be good for you to learn early on, and start working your way through that. Now, some of you, I mean, I don't want to say something discouraging, but if you don't start this process, you're never going to finish it or succeed. And you shouldn't avoid starting all these activities that we're talking about because you're not confident, because you can't wait another school year or two until you become more confident. That's not what we're suggesting. We're saying no matter where you are, even if you're a first year student, you can start doing these things. And eventually, what happens to some number of computer science people is that they discover, somewhere in the middle of this process that it isn't for them, or it's just too hard. And that's okay. A lot of what we're telling you would apply to all kinds of other applied things as well. So don't allow the super hardest classes that you might have to take to discourage you. You can have very good tech careers in applied tech that don't require you to, write compilers while you're in school, or do other crazy projects that are just way beyond what you think you would ever be capable of.
Anders, you suggested contributing to open source projects. Can you give some examples of some open source projects that you contributed to?
I mean, these are all like really tiny contributions, but it does like teach you how to work in the workflow. So I like filed a few bug reports and some like common Python. Like I discovered a bug in pandas, which is like a common packet library for analyzing data. And I just filed a bug report. And first one I filed, they just closed it because I didn't describe it properly. So it was like a learning process on like how to file a good report, how to document technical stuff. And that's like the kind of thing that serves you well in a like professional setting. So bug bounty programs, I don't know, actually. They're often kind of with a cybersecurity bent, as far as I know. And like often like the people in like pursuing that are pretty sophisticated, but I do know people who want bug bounties, just maybe not like the first thing you're gonna try out for.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to something that we've kind of alluded to, and we're moving into kind of a secondary topic, and that's things you can do on your own. Bob, you alluded to this, and I think Anders, you did as well. And that's doing projects on your own, but the projects have to be bite-sized projects. So if you've got enough going on in your life that you can't take on a major self project, do something small. Anders,
and
Bob,
Anders
do you have any
mentioned-
examples?
Yeah, Anders mentioned doing a personal website and using the popular frameworks that make that easy is a huge step forward for you, because you're going to learn how to dot a lot of I's and cross a lot of T's to actually put it together and make it completely functional. And if you can build your own personal website, and then you can build some for some friends or acquaintances or other students who are trying to do a side business or advertise their dog walking skills or any random thing you can imagine. You guys all have friends who are into things who would think it was really cool to have a website. So if you can build your own, you can build some more, because you can build them for your friends. And website building is a perfect kind of applied tech thing to do if you're as a first thing to do, because their frameworks are extremely well documented. Many of them are just completely free for students, certainly. And it's a great way to get your feet wet.
Yeah, or here's another suggestion that's maybe even more accessible is, I know a bunch of classes make you do some really like, sometimes you have to do some really tedious or annoying stuff, and figure out, one thing you can do is figure out a way to automate something that's like tedious and annoying. So for instance, while I was in school in a non-tech class, I had a thing for a report I had to like download and like relabel like hundreds of files from Google Drive. So doing that manually is hell. So I just figured out how to write a Python script called the API and do that. Or for instance, some of your computer science classes might have some pretty tedious tasks. Write a script to automate it, and you'll probably have learned something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Python scripts are, another great learning step that are, and they're broadly useful. If you just sort of think about, once you learn Python, you think about things that you could do to, parse through numbers of documents or build data tables, or pretty simple, straightforward stuff that's within your grasp. And if you can do that, if you can write a Python script that will make a task that someone else needs to do just go a lot faster and smoother, those are concrete things you can put on your resume and that demonstrate real value.
Okay.
I'm going to drop a link to a book that gives a bunch of tutorials on how to, it's called Automate the Boring Stuff. And it gives you a bunch of examples of like simple tasks you can automate using code. So like, I don't know, automate your taxes and your accounting and your budget in Excel, or renaming a bunch of photos, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great book. That's a great suggestion, Anders.
Cool.
Everybody who looks at that can come up with a whole bunch of things that they think might be useful to do. And that's even perhaps easier if you're taking a Python class or took one already, easier as a first step even than doing a website.
So I want to change the topic here for a bit. And these are, again, things you can do on your own. But I want to talk about networking outside of the university. I suspect that there are some of you who got started in this process who thought, wow, I don't know anyone. How do I get started? So I'm going to throw it open. Anders, Bob, what can you do if you're getting started and you really don't have contacts in the industry?
So as someone who like had zero context in the tech industry moving to California, like the first way I kind of got to context in the industry was talking to peers, because you being in California, you surely have a friend who like has a friend who works in tech, or has a friend who has a dad who works in tech and stuff. And often you can get an introduction like that, and someone who can like point you as how the industry works. Another source, especially if you're taking a computer science, a lot of your instructors, even at a 4-year university, probably even more at a 2-year university, will have worked in industry. And I'm sure if you're like the one person in the class who's like interested in what the instructor is saying, you can stand out and they'll be glad to like give you advice on the side.
Yeah. People over 30 love talking about their own experiences. So whoever your instructor is, whether they worked in tech or whatever the experience level is, it's a very concrete, simple suggestion, which is that asking people about their own experiences and being friendly gets you really far in terms of building relationships with people.
I'm going to ask a really dumb question. And I don't know if you can raise your hand to show me, show of hands. How many of you have a current LinkedIn profile? I see 1, 2. Who's got a current LinkedIn profile? I see 3. Hi, Olivia.
Mhm.
So I'm going to suggest to you that every one of you should have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile that's relatively close to what your resume says. And if you don't, I'm going to say that that's probably one of the first things that you want to do after. A thought that I had in terms of how to find people if you don't have contacts. What about using LinkedIn as a way to meet people? Well, the first thing that Bob and Anders said to me is, wow, I get spammed with all sorts of contacts. But what if you're seeking out people who are alumnus of the same school that you're in now? Okay, is that I'm going to call it a soft bridge to exploring a conversation? I mean, how do you start a conversation? Hey, I wanted to ask you some career tips, but it's alumni, fellow alumnus from school name seeks your input, something soft. So that's a way to meet people. Lots of people used to send me as a recruiter outreaches. I only pick up and answer some of them, but if you don't have contacts, get creative. Ask your friends, ask your neighbors, look for alumni within
And it's
LinkedIn.
okay to create LinkedIn profiles when you're just a student. If the only thing on it is that you're, in your second or third year at this college and on your way to the 4-year college, or you've just gotten into one, or whatever your situation is at college. But the other thing that you will see is that if you start looking at other people on LinkedIn who are in the same situation, who are students, you'll start to see the kinds of things that they have on their LinkedIn profiles. And that's just a really aspirational something that can guide you. You can see things, you'll be like, I need stuff like this on my LinkedIn profile and in my resume. And so once you're on LinkedIn and you know how to create one, these are just sort of, it's sort of like saying, well, you need to know how to type and you format a resume, right? Well, so the LinkedIn is the same kind of environment. Like, you need to get yourself an account and get yourself a profile, even if it's very simple and largely empty at the beginning, because it will allow you entry into the community and you'll learn a lot of things from looking around on LinkedIn. Anders, you had suggestions about things to avoid on LinkedIn.
Oh, on LinkedIn, yeah. I'm also just seeing an interesting question in chat that we should maybe address. So, how to intro and when outreaching, how do I be clear but not demanding when asking for a reference from an entirely new contact? Well, maybe Tom and Bob, do you want to speak to that first? Because you've probably been on the other side of that much more than me.
Well, asking for a reference is the wrong question. If I don't know you, I'm not going to give you a reference. Okay, asking for some time can be a fair ask.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't make it a demand. Okay. To me, it's would you be willing to? I find that people, if you approach them correctly, are very willing to help, but you can't demand. So, and having a bridge to an introduction, like I'm also studying at your same school and wanted to ask you for career advice on how do I get started in, maybe it's finding an internship.
Yeah,
But-
can I just asking people if you can have a few minutes of their time, can you come by in their office hours and get some advice? I think that's really the way to start. And you can't, people will not write you a reference if they don't know you. Like you can't approach someone and say, hey, I was in your class, but if you haven't built a relationship with them, that's not really going to work.
Yeah.
So you need to build a relationship first, and you do it by spending time with people and talking to them.
One good way I think of like phrasing an approach, and that's mostly if it works if there's like some sort of shared backgrounds. So say like your school or other, it's like, hey, like I've seen like you've also went to this school. I'd be really interested in hearing like about your journey into tech, into your career. Would you be willing to share? And like people like talking about themselves often, so they'll often be
Even
glad to,
young
like,
people, not just the older folk. Even young people like talking about their experience.
Yeah, young people love talking about their experience. Everyone like in college, when they got their first job, they're like, oh, I'm on LinkedIn, they'll go post, oh, I'm so blessed and honored to like be finally working as a software engineer. Like people are begging to like humble brag.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Tom, you're gradually drifting off the screen. You may need to recenter yourself and or your camera.
Thank you for the
We're
kick.
ending up with only your left ear there for.
It's probably my best year, but who knows? So I'm going to bring it back to a continuation on networking. So you can look for people who are perhaps alumni of your school, or just out of curiosity, find some commonality. For those of you who played sports, I wrestled for over 15 years. And I can't tell you how many times we've talked about high school and college sports to the people that I work with. I view team sports as a great, I'll call it a way to develop social skills. And, suppose you don't find alumnus. Could you find a guy or a gal that you're trying to connect with on LinkedIn who might have been a fellow baseball player or a soccer player? That's some common ground. I'm looking for in networking with people I don't know. I'm looking for a soft intro, so like a door opener. So that could potentially be one other way.
And it's sort of like going to a.
Say again, please. Can you repeat your question? I didn't understand.
It may have been just some background noise from someone else speaking in their department.
Bob, you were speaking.
Yeah, it's sort of like how the advice for social networking at whatever context, gatherings of other young people or music situations or bars or whatever. It's like the advice is if you stand around and don't approach anyone, you're not going to meet anyone new, right? And you have to you have to be tough in your skin and be prepared for that. You might send out a whole bunch of sort of feelers or sort of gentle approaches to people that you don't yet know, the way that Tom and Anders have spoken about. And 90% of them, may never respond. And that's perfectly okay, because you might send out 20 or 30 of these things. And if you get 1 or 2 people to respond to you and say, oh yeah, hey, I'd be happy to talk to you, that's terrific. Like, so don't start off sending 2 or 3 and then be discouraged because nobody responded. It's sort of like sending your resume. You may have to do dozens of things to get one response. And just go into it knowing that you are not likely to get a lot of responses, and don't have it affect you or discourage you.
Quantity
Yeah, I want to say
breeds quality.
like especially when applying to jobs or like reaching out to people, especially on like LinkedIn and stuff, you really shouldn't take it like as a measure of like your worth if people answer or not. Like odds are the person on the other end is like busy and flooded and with messages, and if you didn't notice or respond, it's probably just that they didn't even see it. So like don't take it as like discouraging. It's not that you're like not worth people's time. It's like, yeah.
Send them another message. Yeah, in email marketing as a recruiter, I would send 3 messages minimum. Sometimes it took the third before you got through. So anyway, let's talk about finding your first internship. Okay, given that you've done some of the things that we've suggested, you've done some self projects, small bite-sized pieces, you've participated in a hackathon, you've networked with the people at school, and you have something that's beyond just coursework to put in your resume. Then you're almost ready to get started, but you need a resume. Okay, show of hands again. Okay, I asked in people who are coming to this that everybody look at the Google video that talked about how to create a great resume for Google.
That's not the question. How many of you did? Raise your hand. If
How
you did.
many looked at the video, Google video on creating resume? Did anyone? We had one.
They may be feeling it's ahead of them still, Tom.
Well, okay. So for those of you who did not, I'm going to very strongly suggest that you take the time. It was in the original announcement. Find the Google video. It's specifically for Google, but the comments that they made are generic and extremely powerful. If you don't have a strong resume, if your resume doesn't have some of the coding coursework that you did, if you have misspellings in your resume, if you aren't starting your resume out with action verbs and showing quantitatively the results that you've obtained, then you're missing the boat and you're going to get discarded by guys like me as recruiters who sift through 100 of them today or a day to find 1 or 2 that we're going to talk to, or bots that are sifting and doing the same thing. You want to make sure that, I don't want to, this is not a how to write a resume session, but I think it's really important that when you make an impression, that your first impression on your resume, also on LinkedIn. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people who've misspelled things on resume or LinkedIn, and I instantly, I won't say discard them, but it's something that's going to set you in the back of someone who's taken the time to proof their resume. If you can't take the time to show attention to detail in a document that's like the most important thing that you have to get your foot in the door, why should I take you seriously? And I typically, I won't. Bob, you had something to add?
Can Anders, you or maybe the moderator, somebody just paste a link to the video that Tom's talking about in the chat. Yeah, so but remember we've made other suggestions. So to follow on what Tom is saying, maybe it's a good idea to make a resume even before you need it necessarily.
Yeah.
It's like building a LinkedIn profile. It's like you want to understand how to do it so that when all of a sudden it becomes time to do it, you're not doing it for the first time. So you can make a resume and you don't even have to show it to anyone yet. You're just sort of like, okay, get all the mechanical part out of the way.
Well, if I can add, just having the resume out there can kind of create lucky happenings without you lifting a finger. So maybe I can share a story about how I got my first like paid tech job. Was I went to a hackathon and I did pretty good. And one of the judges like noticed and he Googled me. He found my personal website and I had a resume there that he shared with the recruiter at his firm. I didn't do anything. It just by having a resume out there, and that like by having stuff on your resume, so like, you know, personal projects, stuff like that, that people can go and look through, you are creating like opportunities for like lucky events to happen.
Yeah. So I just want to reiterate, don't get distracted by this discussion of resumes. All the stuff we've talked about up to this point is way more important. Like if you don't yet have some skills and enough experience with tool sets and things to do and enough sort of group experiences where you're accomplishing things, if you don't have stuff to put on a resume, sure, it's something interesting to do to know how, you know, to look ahead. Same thing with the LinkedIn profile. But don't get distracted by these things if you haven't yet done all the other stuff we're talking about, because you need stuff to put on your LinkedIn profile and your resume. And doing, you know, getting yourself in the position to have some things to talk about is by far, you know, 10 times more important at this moment in time. If you're a, you know, if you still have a year or two to go in community college, or, you know, you still have a year or two to go in, you know, to get into your four-year college or get out of one and look for a job. So these are very valuable things for those of you who are a little further along, and you should do these things. If you have stuff to put on them already, you should practice with a LinkedIn profile and a resume. But if you don't yet, focus on getting stuff to put on them first, and then do it.
And I don't know, I'm not seeing the link for that. Oh, yes, I am. Direct link to Google Resume. Olivia, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So a couple comments on resumes before we talk about other things. As a recruiter, I read, I won't say a million resumes, but pretty damn close. And I mean, some comments that I make very frequently: show me achievements and accomplishments. Don't show me in your resume a job description. Tell me what you did, what happened because of you. Start every sentence as you can, you know, with an action verb, and try and finish your sentences if you can with resulting in. What I want to know is when you show up, what happens? Quantify everything that you can. You did something, provided great customer service. So I had a boss years ago who, after I would say something like that, he'd say, "So what?" And what he was trying to do is to get me to say, resulting in 15% higher customer satisfaction. I want you to quantify everywhere you can. Show me achievements and accomplishments. I don't care if it was baseball. I don't care if it was something different. Show me things that demonstrate leadership. Show me things where you were the person who took charge. So I'm looking for a track record of achievements and accomplishments. I'm looking for Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to add maybe a more cynical bit of advice, but very useful. You need to tailor your resume to the job you're applying for.
Yes.
And that's especially valid in tech.
Yes.
So, and what my experience with what happens is like a given posting might have like hundreds of applicants. And so, and maybe Tom and Bob, you can speak more to that, but what happens is that people start by filtering by certain keywords. Is like, the job posting says Python and JavaScript. Does that person have Python and JavaScript on their resume? They do Command F, search for the resume for Python and JavaScript. If it doesn't have it, they're probably not going to read it because there will be 50 resumes that have that keyword. Yep. So you do have to put the right keywords for the job on the resume, read the description, and try to link it. Like if you built a project in Python and the job asks for Python, put Python on your resume, and so on.
Yeah, so for those of you who are further along and have already had enough stuff to put on a resume and in your LinkedIn profile, you in a LinkedIn profile, which is static, I mean, you don't get to make a new profile for every job you're going to send yourself to, because you can't be changing your profile that often. But resumes are not static. You don't think of them as static. I'm going to really reinforce what Andrew said. If you actually are in, you know, you have a bunch of skills and you're going to go send your resume to 10 or 15 companies that you're trying to find an internship at, and in response to some job descriptions that you're looking at, you might literally have 15 different versions of your resume to make those 15 different applications, because you want to put in the summary in the beginning of your resume what you're looking for. It's way more effective if you actually describe the job that you're sending your resume to. You don't make a generic summary statement of what you're interested in general. you know, I'd love to get my first job in tech. Like that's not that's not what you say you're looking for. You say, I'm looking for to get more experience in this area with this stuff, which is exactly what they're saying, you know, they need, right? So you have to tailor each resume directly to the position you're applying for. So just get used to that idea as well. That's a common misunderstanding with students looking in the job market for the first time, is to think you can just have a static resume and send the same one to everybody, but you can't.
Mm-hmm. So Anders, when do you think you should start searching for an internship?
This is maybe a slightly controversial take, but I regret not trying right from the beginning. And let me back up. So so when you're at they're kind of like two different contexts in which you search. At the beginning, if you're say year 1 or year 2 of your education, what you're trying to get is just getting used to interviewing, because interviewing is a trainable skill. And so I regret not doing it, and my friends who did it did way better than me, is try and just get some like round 1 interviews, even your first year or second year. Fail at it, like that's perfectly fine. There's like zero shame in that, but that teaches you how to be confident in an interview and what kind of questions are asked, because interviewing is a trainable skill. And then when you're in your 4th year and you're maybe, or 6th year or whatever your education, then you're applying to 300 jobs and maybe doing 15 interviews, you won't be bumbling through your first interview. So that would be my recommendation.
Everybody bumbles on at least one of them. I'm going to leave a comment that I'm surprised I have to make, but I do. If you are job seeking for an internship or a full-time position, and I'm the guy screening your resume, so I'm a boomer, which means I'm not going to I'm not in the same age group as most of you are. And I hear a voicemail that says, "Hey, dude, you know what to do." What do you think I'm going to do with that voicemail? So you need a business-like voicemail that says very professionally your first and last name, leave a message, and I will call you back. Understandable, you can't leave, I'm going to say, the same sort of a voicemail that you leave for your friends. So when you get to the point where you're job seeking, it's very important that the impression that you make be a good one. That's your voicemail. Another thing that I would offer up,
Wait,
that's
Tom, quick 1 second. Let me
go for it.
interject. I think that you can tell that Tom is a boomer because what he's advising you is on how to make your greeting. And I bet if we did a vote, you'd find out that 3/4 of these young people don't even have a voicemail greeting. Or half of them don't even have voicemail at all. And that because it's just become a thing. Young people don't ever, they don't want anybody leaving them messages. They don't want to listen to them. They want people to text them.
So that's an excellent point, Bob. But the reality is, maybe you thought you'd never need it, and if you get voicemails,
oh, you do now. I'm supporting you. Yes, you absolutely. So if you're listening to both of us, right? If you don't have a voicemail box set up and a greeting that just makes you sound like an adult, as opposed to like it's all about, organizing social events in your life, then you need to do, that's like one of the first things you need to do, because if you're going to put yourself out there.
So I saw a really interesting question in chat, but that I'm not really confident in taking, is could you please comment on resumes for career changers, which
Yeah, I
might
saw that.
apply
I was
to a lot of people here.
Yeah. Do you want, I have some advice for that, having hired a lot of such people. I think that in terms of presenting yourself, I'm gonna jump right to some very, very specific suggestions, which are when you present yourself on LinkedIn or in a resume as a career changer. So if you're, whatever, in your late 20s and you've already done a couple of other things, or you're in your 30s or 40s or even later, you've done other things for a while, what you want to do is to make sure that only like of the physical space that you're taking up with your LinkedIn profile or your resume, you want to kind of summarize all the things that you did earlier in your life as briefly and as compactly as possible. And a couple of tricks to do that are one of the things that people often do is they literally arrange things where you talk about, so if you've spent the last 3 or 4 years or 2 or 3 or 4 years building your eligibility for tech positions, then you write the resume where that's the stuff you see first, and you go backwards from just the most recent things you've done to the things you did last year and the things you did the year before, and then you start over again. You draw a line across your resume, and then you list the older stuff below at the bottom, because basically you're trying to draw people's attention to your new credentials, and then you want to include the fact that you have real work experience and did real things in your other jobs, but they need to be minimized in the amount of space that they take up and airtime. And if people who that will show people that you have the maturity of focus to know that you need to meet the eligibility requirements for tech positions that you're looking for, while still listing your experience. Well, you'll get credit for all those great things you did in your first career or your second career.
Yeah, and insofar, and maybe Tom and Bob will be able to speak to that better, but I've seen people who've gotten accepted at my company who were career changers, and one thing they did was, when talking about their past experience, they kind of, they don't put it first. That's great advice from Bob, first of all. But when they talk about their past experience, one thing they do is they try to genericize kind of skills they picked up in their previous career. So maybe you weren't a tech lead, but maybe you worked in a context where you managed people and delivered stuff on schedule. These are also things you do as a software developer or a data scientist or web designer, or I don't know, or maybe you're in a context where you wrote a lot, or technical writing is a super important skill, and being a good writer will score you points.
Let me make a couple.
And these are just
some. Yeah, like that, Anders. If you've had a series of jobs that are retail focused or customer service focused, people are not necessarily so interested in all the details of each one of those jobs or how many years you were at this place and that place. They might be, and they'll be able to reference it. But when you talk about it, you want to say, I earlier in my career, I spent 4 years or 8 years or 12 years in leading teams of people in the retail environment, or I spent so many years working in customer service and learned really good communication skills and collaboration and patience, and I really developed my skills to sort of in active listening and blah blah blah. But you collapse your skills, and you sort of summarize the way you talk about it, where you're describing a higher level set of things that you learned in those early career experiences, and that just makes it more palatable. It's packaged up and takes up less space, and if they want to talk about any of those individual experiences, they'll ask you about them. But if you spend too much time spontaneously spending 5 minutes talking about one of those early career jobs, you're kind of indicating that you're off track, lost focus.
You're using airtime that you could spend doing other things. I do like with previous non-related job experience, I like to see people who have a track record of achievements and accomplishments. So listing those things is useful, but you're going to have to grossly high-level summarize previous work experience in unrelated industries, because people aren't that interested. Knowing that you had a job that lasted longer than a year, that you have a good job tenure is relevant. Achievements and accomplishments are relevant, and transportable skills, which is something I believe we've hammered on, are relevant.
Maybe the exception would be, I've seen that a lot, but sometimes your previous job will have domain knowledge that's relevant to you as a developer. So I don't know. I've had people on me who worked as a technician in a factory. That's relevant domain knowledge if you're an engineer designing factory tools after stuff like that. That might be the one exception I can think of.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring it back to a completely different subject, and that is
Tom, one second before you do, just in the context of what we were talking about, describing your earlier experiences. If you're a second career person, but it's relevant also for younger folks who've had a few internships. Don't ever get tricked into accidentally talking about what you didn't like about those jobs, or the people you didn't like, or how you were mistreated or treated unfairly. Do not discuss negative things in any way, in any kind of conversation about potential work opportunities. I know that it's very popular these days to encourage people to be more open about their difficult experiences in life, and that's a really good thing, and you should definitely do that with your friends and your family and anyone in your life who can be supportive to you. But when you're in a job situation, it is a huge red flag if you ever are, and experienced recruiters or job interviewers will try to trick you into talking about things that you didn't like, or people that you didn't like, or difficult things. And the answer to those questions needs to be very sophisticated. There are certain answers that are acceptable. You can Google them, but spending a lot of time telling them the actual story of what happened to you and how it was unfair, or you didn't like it, or whatever, that's just a killer.
Bob, do you maybe want to give an example of how like you would smooth the angles on a story? Because I think it sounds a good way.
So you could have had a terrible boss who treated you terribly, and you basically don't tell that story. You just sort of say, well, the priorities of the organization that I was in were different than what I was looking for. I was looking for experience where I could do more of X, Y, and Z, and that's what you say. I mean, basically, you don't talk about how you couldn't get along with a coworker or your boss. You just never, that's something you never want. And by the way, yes, there are situations where that actually happens to you and you're a victim and it's terrible. But if you're finding that that's happening to you, regularly, then you need to look into yourself, because you basically have to really do your best in any kind of work context to avoid conflict and to not kind of process what's happening in your collaborative environments as like who's winning, who's losing, who's insulting you, who's not. Or like if you're finding yourself thinking about those things, you really have to overcome that and look in a different direction for the skills
Bob,
to do.
I'm going to second that. As a recruiter, the two biggest mistakes that you could make in an interview: bitching or moaning about past or current employers. Number one, which you just said. Second, all talk and no listen. You want your answers to be succinct.
Sure.
You want to listen and directly answer to what the whoever's interviewing you has said, but don't wander. 2 to 4 word answers and move on, and let the whoever's interviewing you drive the conversation.
Hey, speaking of succinct, we need to stop talking and answer some questions. We're kind of running out of time.
I want to, before we do that, I want to cover something, and that is when you're looking for a job, okay, you need to start early. And I guess the question I'm going to ask, throw open to both of you, is how many resumes do you have to send out? My son was looking for an internship this summer. Okay, I let him do his own searching. The previous year, I found him an internship that lasted 2 years. He sent out about 40 resumes, and he was not successful in finding a job. Okay, what I'm going to tell you is finding a job can be almost a full-time job. And I think it's super duper important to initiate lots of contacts on an ongoing basis. So don't give up. It's a discouraging process, but quantity will breed you quality.
And the more experiences that you have allow you to have job opportunities sometimes like appear. I've joked with Anders, like there's the front door, trying to get into the front door of a company, which means sending your resume in response to a job posting and seeking an internship. And then there are all kinds of side doors that are not visible to you as a student, but that are visible to anyone who has experience, because through those experience and networks, you might be have someone tell you about an opportunity and offer to pass your resume along, and
with an endorsement.
That's like 100 times more value. You can send out 100 resumes and not get a response. But if you ask everybody that had any connection to anything that you actually did, if they know about any opportunities that they could refer you
Yeah.
to, and if they'd be willing to pass along your resume,
Uh,
that immediately gets you 10 times the power or 100 times the power.
Yeah. So I fully agree with Bob. Like the networking thing is the easiest and best approach, but it doesn't always work. So maybe to give an idea of like orders of magnitude, with my friend in college, we all had spreadsheets and we kept track of the number of applications and success rates and the analytics on that, which I know is like really nerdy, but that's who we were.
Can you
Super
guys
nerd.
tell Anders is
Data
good at what he
science.
does?
And so the numbers we saw pop out kind of in our friend group, and these were mostly like straight A students with some side projects, so but maybe no prior internship. So people who did things right. Most of us were looking at 100 to 300 applications sent, and most of these are having tailored your resume to the application. So it's a substantial amount of work. If you're looking for something, like if you're a year off from graduating, you don't start 3 months before, you start a year before.
Oh,
The
yeah.
other thing,
That's my sermon.
the other thing I'm going to add to the tailored resume is I think it's more powerful to have tailored cover letters too, where you
Yes.
talk about something that stood out in the job, the company, the project, rather than, dear friend, I'm looking for a job. Here's my resume.
Yeah.
Or a standard cut and paste. Yeah, I've seen both tried, and I think it's more powerful to learn a little bit and take the time, which is obviously going to reduce your volume. You might try both, mass spamming approach and tailor a number of them as well.
I am going to just let everyone know that it's now 7 o'clock. And I know that this is such an amazing conversation. I feel like we could go on for quite a bit more, but I do want to honor the time that everyone has given us tonight, especially to you, Tom and Bob and Anders. Thank you so much.
And Sarah, I hope we do have time that we can take some questions, even if it does run over.
Yeah, I'm willing to stick around and help answer a few questions for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, likewise.
I will definitely leave this open. Truly, thank you so much for coming. And the only thing that I'm going to do is just put up the date quickly for the next Tech Talk while everyone is still on here. It will be October 27th, and the topic will be cybersecurity. So mark that in your calendar, and then the link that I popped in the chat is where you'll be able to find the marketing piece for it when it's ready to go. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for supporting Bay ICT. We're grateful to all of you.
Who's got some questions for us?
You can also type if you don't want to speak up, that's fine too.
Yeah, please feel free to unmute and talk.
I have a question.
Please.
So I'm 32, and I guess this would be my third career change. So on my resume, would you just recommend, if my first career was 6 years EMS, and then my second career was starting my own importing business, so should I just make it like a block of information on the bottom of the resume with everything I'm doing IT related? I don't want to get in. Do I have to get into multiple references? Can I just?
No, I wouldn't don't put references on your resume. We're chronologically backwards. I'm going to be the only thing that's going to get you an interview with me is going to be relevant experience to what I'm looking for. You can list that, but listed briefly, working chronologically backwards.
Bottom, right, folder.
Yeah.
And you don't need, you did two different things. It's okay to have those both mentioned. It's just the overall, you don't want to take up a ton of space with it.
Sure.
Maybe just to describe what the kinds of things you were doing and the skills, and then maybe in a second sentence or the second half of the one sentence, describe the things that you think that you learned from those jobs.
Sure.
You learn from them that will be helpful, in any that make you a more serious and experienced employee in general. So that's okay. It's just that's a good thing to do.
And because I'm not in college, and so you would just recommend? I'm looking at going to a couple local hacking seminars, groups, meetups, is that okay to put on?
Don't
As
put them
well?
on, don't put them on there until you've gone there. Okay, it's
Okay.
the one thing along with that is adding buzzwords to your resume. Don't put Python on your resume unless you know something about Python. I've seen technical interviewers that if they see a buzzword on your resume, they're going to ask you what you know about it. And if you
Sure.
can't address the question adequately, you're toast.
Yeah, don't describe
Sure.
things you tend to do, only things you've already done.
Only things I
Or-
can do.
Or you're already in the middle of doing, like it's okay to say that you're in the middle of doing
Yeah.
this.
So-
extra project, yes.
We've got one question from the group from Heva Vathi that says, is it okay to put academic experience as part of a resume? I'm not sure what you're saying, that you were perhaps a teacher, or can whoever wrote this can speak up, Heva Vathi, and clarify what the nature of your question is, please.
So course, okay, I'm of two minds, I guess, on course projects.
Hi.
Like,
Hi, I'm sorry. My name is Hema. So
Okay, hi,
we do a
Hema.
lot of we do a lot of projects as part of the coursework. So I was wondering whether is it a good idea to put all those as part of the resume, or should I remove it?
If they're
Uh,
senior, if they're very, here's my advice, we'll let the other guys punch in, but if they're very,
Mhm.
if you're a senior student, that, and the projects are substantial, then it would be okay, again, especially if you can group them, if you want to say, I took extensive coursework in areas A, B, and C, within which we did projects such as X, Y, and Z, you're reducing all of that to like a 3 lines or 4 lines. That's great. You don't want to go on and on about those things, because if someone's interested, they'll ask you. And if they're substantial and you can actually talk about the things you learned from them and the sophistication or substance of what you did, then it is worth including. But if it's just sort of like, if you're going to just mention that, this course required projects and you did one, and then you're going to have trouble talking about it or impressing people with what you actually accomplished, then don't put it on your resume.
The other
Yeah.
thing to think about is your resume coming right out of school. If you're going right from school into the workforce, your resume should be a 1-page resume. At
Oh,
worst
yeah.
case, maybe 2. I'm looking for short and brief as opposed to long and windy. So it's important to.
And even for the
Keep it brief.
career changers who may be in their 30s or 40s, and it's just, that's why I was saying it's really important to condense your prior experiences so that it still all fits on 1 page, and those things go at the.
So
Thank
to
you.
speak, to speak more to the course projects, I think everyone obviously prefers to see like outside of course projects, because like odds are if it was a course project, there'll be like 200 other students with the same thing on their resume. So it tends to like stand out less. And course projects tend to be pretty similar between classes. Like, so put it if you have nothing else, but like, and do put it if you have like a GitHub link you can point to with some like nice, clean, well-documented code. That's much better than putting nothing. But what's even better is like putting projects you did on your own outside of school. Unless it's like you did like research or something and did something like novel where it's not like you built something to the professor's spec. If it's like reasonably new and like self-directed, then like I would think the course project could be a plus too.
Yeah, especially if what you were asked to do, to develop something that accomplished something in a certain area, and it's clear that you did a really good job, and your thing actually really accomplished a lot, and you learned a lot, and you're confident that you can talk about that, and you're confident because you know that your project was better than lots of other projects, and the professor or the instructor told you it was really great, and you did these things, then you definitely want to be able to talk about that, because you're basically distinguishing yourself. You're saying, the project was to do this kind of thing, and we kind of bit off, a big chunk. We did a very ambitious thing, and our project was quite sophisticated, and it did. Here's the stuff that it did. If that's the case, you want that to be the case, and if it is the case, you definitely want to include it, because it'll be exciting for you to talk about, and it will impress the interviewer.
I just want to capture a question that was asked a little bit ago. Should I put my CTF scores on my resume for a security role?
CTS, what does CTS stand for?
F. Lizzie, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. That's a capture the flag, basically like a hacking competition.
My answer is absolutely. Okay, but
Yeah.
okay, but you want to interpret it so that people who don't know what that is, like me, okay, can interpret it. So if I'm the HR screener, God forbid, looking at this, that what I'm looking for is people who achieve things. So yes, absolutely, achievements
I
and
can
accomplishments are always welcome.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of mileage from putting my scores in coding competitions. That's a great thing to put if you're a student, and it's a good substitute for demonstrating for internship experience or whatever, to demonstrate that you have like real school scores and that you have something to add compared to like, the median person.
So, this exchange was actually really useful because the people reading or screening your resume could be either young people who are completely familiar with all these acronyms and what it might mean, or they can be people like Tom who don't know what you're talking about, right? And so putting a little bit of context and say something like, I participated in this well-known hackathon named X, right? And in the competition, we achieved a score of this, which was, 90th percentile or whatever, or demonstrated, something. You have to kind of put the score in context so people even know what you're talking about. Because if your score was good enough that you feel like it's going to make you look good, then you can describe it in a few more words and actually make that clear to someone who's not familiar with it.
Absolutely. I see a question from Stan that says, how do you answer what's your worst characteristic or trait? So these are things that, kind of beyond the scope of this, but questions to anticipate in a resume. I would strongly advise anyone who's going into an interview, go on YouTube and find some good videos on how to successfully interview. What I would do is, in advance of a conversation like that, I would write down the answer to a question. So I'm not fishing. Well, what's your worst trait? Well, I've been told that I work too hard. I'm a perfectionist. Okay, I'm too much attention to detail.
Yeah, if I can add my 2 cents, I've never heard that question in a tech interview, but a good way of practicing a tech interview, going back to our advice on networking, is if you have older peers who have interviewed at places or who maybe worked at places, if you know literally anyone who's worked in tech, odds are they've been one of the interviewers for someone at some point. Ask them to give you a mock interview. Like, I've only been in my career for like a year and a half, and I've already like interviewed 5 people. So like, anyone who's worked in the field could probably help you with a mock interview, and that's great practice. Or even your peers even if they haven't worked somewhere, they can be probably useful mock interviewers.
Very good. Other questions from the crowd? I guess that wraps us up. I'm going to say thank you very much for showing up. Thank you, Anders, Bob, for participating and actually making this I hope, a successful conversation. Sarah, Olivia,
Indeed. And Tom, thank you so much to you for moderating. I think that there was so much great conversation happening, and we can definitely extend this out to the greater community as well. So very important, and we're greatly appreciative.
Yeah, we covered a huge amount of ground. Like normally this would be 3 or 4 different talks like this, with each of the topics we discussed taking the whole hour instead of only 10 minutes or something. So if it felt like we were rushing, it's just we were just trying to cover a lot of ground because we wanted to speak to as many of you as we could.
I guess one more thing. I'm gonna put like my LinkedIn in chat. Like, if any of you wants to reach out, I'd be glad to give at least like individualized advice as far as I can. And maybe this can be an opportunity for you to practice reaching out to people with whom you have shared context.
I'm actually also, I'll put my email on my LinkedIn profile, Bob, if you're comfortable. I'd invite the same, but Yeah, I'll say thank you for taking the time to show up tonight, and definitely go look at that Google video on YouTube about writing a great resume.
I'll put up, let's see, find my LinkedIn profile and stick it up here. But I'll also rely on Anders and Tom to call out one of you that's particularly, or any of you that I could be particularly helpful to talk to. So,
yeah, and I should add, follow our advice. If you do like try and reach out to me, like say, hey, like I was at that talk you gave. Otherwise, you'll probably get like lost in the inbox.
Oh yeah, there's how to personalize a message. Very cool.
Question, has anyone had experience with those code and get paid to learn the code? Where you're like, like the apprentice of a coder that needs to have stuff done. Is that successful?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Well, there's jobs that I heard described on YouTube where you get paid to learn the code. There's tasks that programmers sometimes don't want to handle and they want to outsource them.
No.
So it depends on the context. If it's like a real official contract job, maybe why not? But it also sounds like something slightly unethical that some engineers do, which is to try to outsource their own job. I'd be careful with that.
Thank you.
Point taken. All right, folks, I think that concludes tonight's presentation. And
wait 1 second, Tom, and I'll stick
go for it.
I'm demonstrating what's often true for people who've just recently retired, is that LinkedIn is not on their high priority list for for spending time. So I had not logged in recently and needed to like get my phone connected to the
Yeah, in both cases, I think if you just Google Bob Vallone, you can find Bob.
yeah,
And
there.
Tom Cran, you can find me.
I got it. Yeah. It's in particular, I think that Tom and I, as the older gentlemen in the room here, would be more useful to those of you who are a little bit further along and have a bunch of experience in your belts. I mean, I think Tom and I have said everything that we can say about what you should be doing in your first, second, third year to build experience. We've all chimed in on that a lot. If you feel like you've had some things to talk that you've accomplished and that you have experiences under your belt that put you in the position of looking for internships, the further along you are in this pathway that we've described to you, the more useful Tom or I would be. And the earlier you are in the pathway is, well, Andrew's useful at all stages, but he's more useful than us at the earlier stages. Just because he's still a young man himself, who's just a couple years ahead of you guys.
Good enough. Well, I think that
right.
concludes tonight's presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Good evening.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.